Record. Perfect. Hello and welcome, ladies. Hi. I'm so excited to be here with my beautiful sister, Maya Nicole, who I know from our Temple Body Global Mentorship with our mentor, Sophia Tom. And yeah, so we are sisters, and I'm also very excited to learn more about Maya's work, which is her passion and which is a huge topic and is so important also in combination with our theme, the self-love. So I feel this is super aligned, and Maya and I have been weaving together, and yeah, I can't wait to share her with you, with all of you. So I just want to start by introducing my beautiful sister here. So Maya's work and passion is shadow work and inner child work, as I have shared. And as she so beautifully puts, I just want to read the first part here. So her aspiration is to guide you towards truth and freedom, which is huge and beautiful. And she says, I am here to help you clearly identify your shadows and guide you into the depth of your subconscious to unravel the programming, patterns, and behaviors that cause you suffering. I believe that to truly heal, we need to go back to the root of where our shadows originate from and heal from that place. And she does this by guiding you through a process of inner child work. Together, we reparent and nurture the emotions and the child within and burn away the self-limiting stories that we internalized at a young age and carry with us. I mean, that sounds so good to, just come through healing to this place of freedom and truth, which is super aligned with what I stand for as well. So yeah, just really bowing to Maya and her work, which is so needed and potent at this time. And Maya has her background. I just want to share a little bit of her background with you as well. So her background is a bachelor in psychology and a master in social work, where she focused on mental health. And this was not enough for her, so she dove deeper, and then she got certified by Teal Swan, which is a very well-known spiritual leader. I'm sure many of you know her. And there she dove deeper into shadow work and inner child work to really just combine the Western psychology and aspect with some more spiritual work. And yeah, this was still not enough. So she went deeper and even more intense, where she studied soul retrieval and the subconsciousness through plant medicine with the Katukina tribe. I hope I'm pronouncing this right.
Yes.
She will say that again, Katukina tribe in the Brazilian Amazon. So there she really combines all of the aspects that are important. Like I find that this is a very holistic approach where she really found a beautiful bringing together of all the different aspects of healing. And she wants to do this to really bring her clients into a place of conscious wholeness and assist her clients into moving forward. There I refer to her text again, with new awareness, so you can stop playing out old unhealed wounds and then start living from this place of conscious wholeness. Just breathing into all of that beauty and giving her some love.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you and be part of your self-love sisterhood as well.
Yes, welcome, Maya, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here. Thank you for sharing your presence and your gifts, and yeah, just really sharing this important work with us so we can learn a little bit more about how to really approach the shadow, like what is the shadow, and how can we, yeah, really be aware of it and even maybe move through it with a place of more love and compassion, and even bring it into our daily lives, like this
Yes.
this awareness of the shadow and how it's connected to the inner child and to our self-love. That's what I really would love to, yeah, flow with today.
And
Anything?
it's all like so linked together. So it was perfect that you kind of realized that to have self-love, you need to know the shadow work, and to do shadow work, you also need an aspect of self-love there to even want to grow in that way, right?
Yeah,
So they do go so hand in hand.
yeah. So is there anything you feel like you want to add about yourself from what I shared? Just
I
whatever.
think you hit all the important parts. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just, yeah, my biggest passion. And so I love any conversation involving shadow work, inner child work, self-love, even it all, like I said, it all goes together. So you said it all.
Beautiful. And Maya is living in Ecuador right now. So we're
Yes, I'm in
having a
Ecuador.
global connection here again.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, yeah, let's just start with just, yeah, diving into this, or like defining in your words this term shadow. What is a shadow, and what, like, if someone wouldn't know about shadow work and it would be like, what shadow, like I have no idea, how would you explain it to this?
Yeah. I think that this is such an important question to start off with, because the shadow and shadow work is a term and terms that are thrown around in the spiritual community so much. And it's so common that when I tune in with someone one-on-one and we start talking about shadow work, they're like, I actually maybe don't even know what that means. And so it's important that before we go any further, we make sure that all of us are on the same page, understanding what the shadow is. And so basically, the shadow is any core belief, any behavioral pattern, any thought pattern, any emotional pattern that arises in us, that we are either fully or a little bit unconscious of. And so the reason the shadow is called the shadow is because it is in the dark, which means it's stored in our subconscious. And our subconscious is the part of our brain that we are not aware of. And so therefore the shadow is in the dark. And our shadow comes from traumas that we experienced in our childhood. So in our childhood, we go through traumas. And I think that in our society, trauma is most commonly looked at as these really horrible things that happen to us, which it is, like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all of it. Those are definitely traumas, but there's a spectrum of traumas, and traumas can be very little things in our life that just made us feel something not good, right? So that, I mean, trauma is such a spectrum of things, and we've all been through traumas. We all experience traumas in our childhood, either big or small or both. And what these traumas do to us is they imprint us with a story about the world, about ourselves, about other people, about relationships. And we carry these stories with us, and they imprint us with emotions and feelings, and we carry these emotions and feelings with us. And so until we can look at the patterns in our life and the things that keep showing up and trace it back to where those things began, we won't be able to identify shadows or work through them. And so really our biggest tool for identifying a shadow is to look at our ongoing behaviors, patterns, negative core thoughts and beliefs, and our triggers. Our triggers are such good growth material for finding our shadows. So our shadows are stored in our subconscious, and we are unaware of them until we start looking at patterns and behaviors and can identify what's really going on.
And I mean, like, I had just had this memory. We are operating mostly out of our subconsciousness, right? Like throughout the day, like I think it's even 95%, if I remember it correctly. So
yes,
like is it true that we are actually run by the subconscious and by our shadows as well?
I believe so. Yeah, I think that that's kind of like the goal of this path of self-awareness and like conscious evolution, is because we want to get to a place where we're not run so much by our subconscious, but we're able to react to things, respond to things more so in a conscious way, because we have done this work and are aware of what was driving our reactions and our behaviors. And so I think the goal with shadow work is to move from this place that most people are in of letting, or of the subconscious controlling most of our daily life. And yeah, and that's why this is so important. And the thing is that whether someone wants to engage on this path or not, wherever people are in their spectrum of growth and spirituality, their subconscious, their shadows are playing a role. Like, it's not something that we can get away from. And so that's why I feel like this work is so important for everyone, because it doesn't matter how spiritual you are or not. This is something that controls us and affects us and causes us a lot of suffering, no matter who we are.
So in your personal life, how would you say has shadow work impacted your life and your growth and your happiness and your joy? And just, yeah, like, would you say you are more aware than like this 95% subconscious patterns running? Like, how would you give someone, if someone hasn't done this at all, like they just starting and they're like, so why would I do this? Like, tell me something beautiful. Tell me like how can I improve my life, or what can I change? Like, that makes me want to dive into these topics.
Yes. So that's such a big question, because shadow work, and I love it, but shadow work has changed my whole entire life, which is why I am so passionate about this and why I devote my life's work to this. When I got more into the spiritual aspect of psychology and healing, it was about 4 years ago. And at that time, I had just gotten out of a really horrible relationship, and I was in a job that wasn't completely fulfilling to me. I was living in a city that didn't really resonate anymore. So all these things in my life needed to shift. And the only way that I was able to shift those things and get clear on what I actually want and move myself to a place where I was actually able to attract what I want is through shadow work. And so, you know, shadow work is a never-ending process. There's always going to be more to do. But the point that I'm at now, since I started doing this deep work and really devoting myself to it, my whole entire reality has shifted. I mean, friends, relationship, job, place I live, interests, the way I dress, literally everything. And I am so much more in alignment with my higher self, my true self now. And I mean, really, ultimately, that's what brings us self-love, and that's what brings us joy and happiness. So one thing that I'll say to answer your question is that because of the law of attraction, which I'm sure most of us in here know what that is, whatever is stored in our subconscious, those emotions, those patterns, those core beliefs dictate what we attract into our life. So if we're walking around with all of these shadows in us, and we're living our life from this, what you're saying, this 95% place where we're being driven by this, all these stuff stored in our subconscious, we attract people and experiences and situations that are a vibrational match to the stuff that we're carrying in us. And so until we can get aware of what that stuff is and clear it, we're going to continue to attract things that trigger us. We're going to continue to attract things that re-spark those traumas within us. And that doesn't feel good, right? And that is happening because the universe is trying to get us to see over and over again, hey, look, this is what you need to work on. Hello, like, do you see the pattern yet? And it's super uncomfortable. And so doing this work changes your vibration. It changes what's going on inside, and therefore changes what you're attracting into your life. And so I think that that is like the most potent part of this, is that it changes everything.
So I have a few inspirations now, but I wanted to first just tie back, like, why did you start with shadow work? Like, what was the initial, like, because there must be something, like, you mentioned that everything like didn't feel right, but some people stay there like forever, just they won't do anything. So what was the spark, like, and how did you find it?
Well, at the time I was working as a therapist in a mental health treatment center. So I was working with depression and anxiety and eating disorders and addiction and all, the whole spectrum of mental health issues. And I was aware enough at that point. I mean, I've always been someone interested in the psyche and self-awareness, but I was young, so I was at the beginning of the journey. And so I felt very inauthentic showing up in this mental health field, not being in a good place myself. Like, how can someone show up to help others when it's not that you have to be perfect, but when you're in such darkness in yourself? And so that was my first cue to, okay, this needs to go on hold while I give myself the attention that is needed here so that I can show up for people, And because I had been working in the mental health field, kind of like the typical therapy setting, I knew that I didn't want to go in and be treated in that kind of modality, because I just saw that it didn't go deep enough, and I was craving something more. And so I kind of took that time in my life as an opportunity to find an alternative healing method that worked for me, so that I would know what to share for other people. So it all lined up perfectly, like that time in my life. And I was always interested in spirituality. And when I left my job, I went and lived with my parents for a bit. So I had all this time and space to explore. And I discovered Teal Swan at that time. And she's like the mama of shadow work and inner child work, the new age mama. Carl Jung is like the originator of that. But the new age mama, the spiritual mama of those terms. And so she has this process called the completion process, which is...
Just one moment. Would you say, because I just want to tie this in, would you say like you made this shift out of self-love, because you said you wanted to take care of yourself actually first in order to show up for your clients? So would you say it was out of like care for yourself and love for yourself?
No. No. And no. At that time, I was in this place of self-loathing because of many, many things. I was in a place of self-loathing, but I guess I had a piece of me that was hopeful and a piece of me that knew there was another type of life available. And I was just like holding on to that piece. And I think that things had gotten so bad, which it does for a lot of people when it's time to change, that there was no other choice but to work on myself and make some major changes. And so we'll go into, like how self-love ties into it for sure. But at that time in my life, I did not have much self-love.
Okay.
And
okay, so back to Teal Swan.
So I discovered Teal and I started using her completion process. She posts all these free YouTubes and I just like would watch them like three videos a day and just spend my day processing it and doing what she was saying on myself. And I saw my whole perspective in my life start to shift because of it. And so I was like, there is something here. And I started doing shadow work with another therapist. Or I think it was a life coach. She was a life coach, and she focused on inner child work and shadow work, and it changed my whole entire life. And so that was really the only modality that was able to, like, I could see the actual transformation happening. And so that Teal Swan was the catalyst for me to go into shadow work and inner child work.
Okay, so your like the trigger was because it was so bad you needed to change, and then you really like found a different approach than the Western medicine because you saw that this was not enough. Like you wouldn't want it to be treated like that as your like your clients were. So there was like kind of an end to this process, to this healing method, and that's where you started to look for something else.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, wow. So I think what I like with the 95% subconscious, I think like what happens is we're trying to reprogram the subconscious to function in a more positive way. So the programs that are running are positive programs rather than the old negative programs that we brought in from our childhood. And that's like just what I'm trying to understand myself. And what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I think like if a friend of mine, you know her, Carla, she had this beautiful and powerful metaphor where she referred to love and fear being the most potent attracting forces. Like, so love attracts and fear. So like it depends where we are in our life. If we are like just driven by the old subconscious programs from the childhood wounds, then it's probably a lot of fear, and this will attract more so we can clear. And then if we're like moving through this process, like with you or with Teal, with other healing modalities, we can really shift and bring us into a more higher frequency state of love and attract these experiences. So I think that's what we're trying to do with this work.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times in the spiritual community, there's so much focus on being positive. And I agree with what you're saying, but I like to take out the words positive and negative, because part of shadow work is like, the goal is truth. The goal is acceptance and understanding, not so much always feeling or being positive, right? And so I think we need to take that out of like the vocabulary a little bit, because it puts so much pressure and shame on people, right? To like, we think that when we're not feeling our best, or when these shadows creep up, which they always will, right? That we have done something wrong, or that we're going to attract something bad, which I like to move people away from that and just into a place of how can I notice this and accept it and love it and nurture it and not push it away. Because if it's not positive and we're in that mindset of I just need to be positive, then we end up actually going away from shadow work, because what we end up doing is shoving or pushing away that which we don't find lovable or positive or good, right?
Yeah, right. Like I still have sometimes these negative and positive. I didn't mean it in the way of that I used to, like that we all are used to. I meant it more in a space of like where am I operating from? Is it a
Yes.
place of self-love and acceptance, or a place of fear and self-loathing? Because I
Yes.
notice within myself, like for a long time in my life, I have also been very, like I operated very much from this place of wounding and of self-loathing, like where I used to be really hard on myself, like trying to fit in, trying to like have the perfect body and like just be accepted through manipulating myself. And yeah, I really tried to shape myself into something that I was not, and it needed a lot of force and pressure. And
Yes.
it was all from this place of like I would look into the mirror like, oh my gosh, that's not good and that needs to change. And then through all the work I've done, through the like just becoming aware of it, like, and finding this core like that is love, like I was able to really shift it into a place of acceptance and not being hard on myself anymore. So that's, I think,
Beautiful.
what I'm trying to say. Like, what is the core? What is your core motivation towards yourself, towards life? And then trying to
I
find that.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. I guess I just wanted to say that in case people didn't understand what you're talking about the positive and negative, but
Yeah.
completely there with you. Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's important because you know your clients and you know what people struggle with. So it's beautiful to just clear these terms, because it can be like the words
Yes.
can be triggers for people and they don't even know. And then
Yeah.
like, yeah, you form
Yeah.
into
And
something.
and I feel like
So
these concepts are so big that we need to clarify so many things to make sure it's easy to grasp so that
yeah.
everyone is capable of doing the work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I had an idea right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could like do a little demonstration, like how you would lead someone, and maybe even using triggers as like just to show people like how could you transform something really like quick and easy without having like a lot of, like without doing the whole session, but like in their life so they could
Yeah.
implement it. And I find these triggers were really important, and we've talked about this before, like
Yeah.
because they're everywhere and you can really benefit so much from like working around that.
Totally. Triggers are like, that's gold in shadow work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's say there was a trigger. If we all go about our lives and throughout the day, we probably get triggered.
Maybe we can do it together, like you can just use me, and
Okay.
because that's like even more realistic. And
Totally.
I hope I find something, but I'm sure I will. So
Okay. So I guess my question to you would be, if you were coming to me as a client, we would start out by telling me what are the patterns that you're seeing in your life? What are things that trigger you? What is something that you're noticing about yourself that is causing you suffering? So you can choose out of those three, kind of like where you want to go with
yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, something I was actually noticing today, and it keeps reappearing, is around, it's still there, like when I go on social media and I do this Facebook live challenge now. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever I I try to prepare myself, I feel a little bit of resistance, like prior. I feel like, okay, I need to put myself out there now, like, and people will judge me, but that's not even on my mind. It's just like this resistance, and I just go about my day and I feel it, and it's like, okay, it's there. And then I do the video, and like whatever happens, like different scenarios. And after it, I I I have this urge to like, usually I like to somehow calm myself, like, so I use food, for example, or I feel this stress response afterwards. Like, I think because it's like so yeah, not even saying that, because that's just what happens. So
Yeah.
like, before going live I have this resistance,
Mhm.
and then after I have this kind of stress response where I usually use food or something like cacao or whatever to calm myself down. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I believe the stress response is due to the fact that your whole self wasn't on board, right? And so when our whole self isn't on board for something and we do it anyways, then we have this stress, this anxiety response afterwards. And then we need to find a way to cope with. A lot of us find a way to cope with that, right? And so I wouldn't say that the stress response is the core here, it's the resistance. And so we would take that a level deeper and say, what is the resistance? If you tune into that moment when you are feeling this resistance, what is it? And you kind of said maybe a fear of judgment, or is there something else there?
Yeah, and I've been observing it, and it's coming up a lot. Even I think today I journaled in my morning journal about a dream or something. Or after the dream, I went deeper, and I think it's, yeah, fear of judgment and even public humiliation. So like, I remember like even past lifetimes and things like that, where I was really like publicly humiliated, like, because I spoke my truth. And I have this phenomenon like occurring, like, in the evening, that I feel kind of like my throat contracts, as if something like a string was around my throat, like something like. And I have this I tie it back to, it could be that I was hanged, or that I was like chopped my head off. Like, I have these memories reoccurring throughout my life, like of like prior lifetimes where I was really like killed or humiliated because of speaking my truth and showing up as I am. So I think
Showing
all
up
of this
as
is
you are.
behind, like, it's a lot, it's behind like the being visible.
So it's beautiful that you have that awareness. A lot of people don't have awareness of their past lives, and for me, in the work that I do, what I focus on is this life in our childhood. And so for those of us who have done past life journeys, we can connect those things, right? But a lot of people haven't done that, and actually it doesn't serve too much with the shadow work, because the shadow work and the inner child work is based in our present childhood, right? And so what I would say, and maybe, if we're into like karma and all of these things, like, it's very possible that that stuff from your past life gets carried on to this life and then becomes your shadows in your childhood. So it kind of all links together anyways, right? But so if we were to say, okay, the shadow here is fear of judgment, right? Could we take that any deeper? What is the fear of judgment? What happens if you get judged?
Yeah, I'm not accepted as I am. Like, I need to be different, or I feel like I need to be different in order to be accepted, because I want to be loved by everyone and appreciated, and just, yeah, that's the fear, like, of not being okay as I am, not being worthy, and not being loved. And yeah, I definitely have memories of my childhood as well where these things were triggered. So.
Exactly. So would you say that the core belief here is, if I am judged, it means that I am what?
That I'm not okay and not worthy of love.
Yeah. So it means that I am bad. It means that I am not worthy. And so this is kind of like the process. It's me helping you to pick out what is at the deepest core of this shadow, right? What's the core of it? Because a lot of times the one that we first identify is more of the surfacey one, and then we can take it a lot deeper by this kind of discussion. And so once we pick that out, like this core belief of I am not good enough, I am not worthy, I am bad, and we would do a little more explanation to see what exactly that is, which essentially is shame. Like shame is I am bad, right? And so shame is kind of the emotion there too, I feel like. But so what would happen once we clearly identified what it was is that you would go into this kind of like meditative process. I would guide you into this meditative process where I would ask you, what is the first time that you remember feeling that you were bad, where you remember feeling humiliated in front of somebody, right? And your subconscious in that question will give you a memory, typically from childhood. Almost always it will come from childhood. And we will explore that memory together. And that's where the inner child work comes from. So if someone is doing this at home by themselves, the question to ask is, ooh, when is the first time I remember feeling this way? When's the first time I remember feeling like I am bad, or having a fear of being humiliated or being humiliated, right? And getting a memory and then going into some inner child work from that memory.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds beautiful. So how would you attend to the child? Like what cues would you give to really nurture the child and love the child and just
Yeah, so before we nurture and love the child, we have to, this is the painful part that's so necessary, we have to re-experience the trauma that happened without trying to change, or not without trying to change it, but without trying to make it better so fast, right? Because the only way to move through emotion is to feel it, right? When we feel it, it starts to dissipate. When we give it attention, it starts to dissipate. If we immediately try to nurture and fix, then we don't give it the time to be seen that it needs to dissipate. So when we have this memory, what we first have to do is we see our little child self there. Say we're about 6 in the memory. We get a really clear picture of what we looked like, where we're standing, what's going on, and we go into that child perspective. So essentially, we are reliving the trauma, reliving the situation from our 6-year-old self. And in doing that, we are able to re-feel what we felt and sit with it for a moment and just let that feeling like take over our body, feel what it feels like in our body physically. And we can start to feel into that 6-year-old. What does this 6-year-old need in this moment that he or she is not getting? And that's where we get the information as to how to nurture and care for that child in the way that he or she needed. So it's really our 6-year-old self giving us the information instead of us trying to figure out how. And so once we've given it the space to be, sometimes that involves crying, screaming, punching something, whatever needs to come out in that uncomfortable space, once that feels complete, then we move into our adult perspective and come into that memory and parent and nurture that child through.
Yeah, wow, that makes so much sense. And I have had this, I've experienced other modalities that are like, that make me remember, like, this is really important to be in the situation and feel it, to relive it, and to experience the uncomfortable emotion first. Like, I mean, I think that's like, just for all of us here, like for the whole life, like for our whole life, I think that's really a part that we're often missing because we don't want the discomfort. Like we don't want to feel bad because it's labeled as bad.
Exactly. And it doesn't feel good, like it feels uncomfortable, and we have body sensations that are very uncomfortable when we're in those emotions. And, it's just so important to know that no emotion is bad. It just is the spectrum of being human. And how can we just hold the space for ourselves to reach some sort of like catharsis so it can come out? It's like a pimple coming to a head, like it needs to come up and be seen and then pop and then it goes away, right? Same thing with the emotions. Like, how can we hold this space for it to come up and don't push it away, don't push it away, don't push it down, boom, like let it out. And then we can move from that place and heal.
Right. Yeah. And if it doesn't happen, like if you're pushing, like if we're not feeling it, it will be like pushed somewhere. It will like manifest as some kind of pain or even depression, lethargy. Like I've experienced
Yeah.
like this freezing mode where we are not able to like do anything or feel anything. Like that will happen if we push it down often and like
Yes.
repeatedly, or like do some other thing like smoking, or like if we use some kind of like soothing medicine, kind of medicine but not really medicine, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can result in so many things so yeah, so many things can come from pushing it down, negative things, even physical illness, you know, ailments, disease.
Yeah.
And yeah, like what Teal says, what I have been taught by her, which makes so much sense to me, is that we're not here to learn how to cope with our problems. We're here to transmute them so we don't have to be coping with life. Like that's where I think like the modern day psychology kind of goes wrong, is that they teach a lot of coping mechanisms, and I don't like to teach my clients how to cope. I want to teach them how to transmute and move through and onto something else, right?
Right. And it's a lot about, I think, the emotion, because emotion is energy in motion. And if we
Yes.
push it down, it gets stuck and then
Yep.
we can't like move anymore. And like that's the worst case scenario, depression and like lethargy and freeze. And that's, I think, a lot of people have these. And especially, I think, antidepressants really like they also do the same thing. And then we're not alive, we're not living,
Exactly.
we're like coping with
Coping.
life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to touch on this really quick, which is important, is that if you're doing this work alone, like my work as the guide is to help clearly identify what the shadow is. But if you're doing this work alone and you can't really get to that place, a really easy way to go into this process without being clear on what exactly the shadow is just feeling what you feel in your body, the physical feeling, and asking yourself, when was the first time I felt this way? You know, because you don't need the words so much, but that feeling is a shadow, right? Mm-hmm. So you can just do it
Because
that
it's
way.
not identified yet. That's why you call it shadow.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do this process, would you say afterwards it won't come back?
I mean, so here's the idea behind this process, is that our subconscious doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. This is why manifestation works. You know, when we can visualize what we want and bring all our senses into that, what does it feel like? What does it smell like? And imagine that it's already there. That's how we manifest, right? And so, I mean, there's other steps to it too, but that's essentially how we manifest. And so it's the same kind of belief, is that if we go back into this memory and we relive the trauma, we give it space, and then we parent this child in the way they didn't get parented, it kind of changes the memory within us a little
Right.
bit. And so then it doesn't have the same power over us. So,
Yeah.
you know, if it's a big trauma, a lot of times we need to revisit the same situation or similar situations a lot of times to move through it, right? But so it's not like this instant thing. But one session of that, doing that one time, does dissipate the power for sure. You know, it might not take it away fully, but slowly that power starts to dissipate. And sometimes if it wasn't a huge trauma, if it was just something fairly small, it can be resolved in just doing that. And so that's kind of a hard question to answer, because it's very dependent on what we're going into, what someone's dealing with. But over time, I wouldn't say that it makes it never happen again. But what happens is, one, it takes away the power, and two, as you become so acquainted with your child self, and as you become so acquainted with these traumas and the shadows, you don't get triggered in the same way, or
Yeah.
you don't get triggered in the same way.
It
It still
builds
happens.
awareness, I
It
guess.
builds
Right?
awareness.
That's what we're
Exactly.
saying in the beginning. Like that's where we want
Mhm.
to, like, that's where we want to move with this consciousness. Like all our work we're doing, like you and me, that's where we want to go with ourselves and everyone who like just knows us or is with us or is working with us. Like to build awareness and
Yes.
consciousness around all these things, because like then, for example, like I would do this like with myself or with you maybe, like
Mhm.
this kind of reparenting, because I have done like work on this situation. Like I know which the situation it is. It came to me as you were
Uh-huh.
speaking, because I know it quite well and I've done a lot of work with it. But I guess it
Mhm.
was like a, like for me, I think it was one of the biggest traumas in my life. So
Uh-huh.
that's why it needs more attention. And I guess the deeper I go into visibility, like the more I need to heal it as well.
Yeah.
So I like,
Yeah.
and yeah, I would, for example, do this session with you. And then if I notice the resistance coming up, I would give more space to the resistance, I guess, and not just
Yes.
like move without awareness and just do it anyways, but just like give space to it, give love to it, and then do it. Or like take some time with myself, sit with it, and then do the Facebook Live, for example.
Exactly. So you would notice this resistance coming up, and you're very well aware of what that resistance is now, right? And so then you take a moment, an hour, however long it takes, give yourself the space to sit with it, acknowledge it. What does this feel like in my body? What's really going on? Okay, how can I parent and nurture this discomfort, this emotion that's happening here, and get to a place where it feels like it has dissipated a little bit, and then move forward. And I would imagine that doing that, you will not have such a huge stress response after.
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
sure of that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually I was 6 at that time where it happened, and you said
Oh.
6. It's so, yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
like we're speaking with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting you say that also, because age is interesting here, because what I've learned is that from actually the time we're in the womb, so before we're even born, from conception until about age like 10, is when we are accruing all of these traumas. And then after around the age of 10, what ends up happening is the traumas that we go through and the negative experiences we go through are mirrors of those original
oh,
traumas. And
oh
so
my God.
that's why we need to go back to childhood, because anything after around like the age of 10 is just a reflection, a mirror of what originally happened.
Oh my
And so it's
God.
not to say you're going to experience the same exact things, but you're going to experience things that make you feel the same way.
That's, yeah, oh my gosh, that's like a huge aha for me now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's an important piece, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just the awareness and like even you just sharing it is like so, can be so life changing. Like just having this
Life
awareness,
changing. Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that it's not bad to be triggered, it's not bad to feel anything, it's just a beautiful opportunity to learn and to
It
grow.
exactly. It's growth material. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so like you, when you face a trigger in your life, like do you use it for this process with yourself, like in your personal life? Or I mean, I'm sure you won't use all triggers, because like I don't know, is it maybe too much for a normal life to use all, or do you not have as much triggers now and you can just like use all of them as material, like how?
I definitely have triggers. Those don't ever go away. Like I said, the triggers don't go away, but they become much easier to cope with, or not cope with. They become much easier to notice and work through, right? As we've done this work. And so for me, they're not as potent anymore, but it does show up. And I was talking to you about this in our meeting yesterday, but like over the weekend, I had this huge trigger, this huge shadow come up of shame. And I spent hours with myself going into this exact process with myself. And so it's not as common anymore that I do it, but there are definitely times where I put everything down and I'm like, okay, this is definitely needed. And I think as you become more familiar with it, that only happens so every so often. And what tends to happen more often is that, like, if I'm triggered, I take a minute to just like, ooh, okay, this is what's being triggered. This is what happened in childhood that is making this trigger. Like, it's this quick kind of like snap back because I've worked through it, right?
So if there are like little triggers, like in normal life, like someone, I don't know, steps over, like pushes you, or like at the grocery store, someone takes the last milk and you wanted the milk and you get triggered, would you do that in this moment as well? Like, oh my gosh, I'm agitated, so like asking yourself these questions, like going back and just nurturing your inner child.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
So
that
in
something?
that moment, okay, I'm triggered. I know what this feeling of triggered in my body feels like because I've done this work, right? So whatever that response physically is. And being like, okay, I'm triggered because, and this happens quickly, right? Like, I'm triggered because one of my shadows is there's not enough for me, right? Like, my needs won't be met. There's not enough for me. And that's why her taking the last milk triggered me. Okay, baby Maya, I love you. And, like, go to another store or this or that, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure your needs are met. Just that awareness and that noticing is huge.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so nice. I love that. I would love to
Yeah.
implement this in my life as well. Just really having this quick, like we talked about this, having this quick process and just like being able to really cope with these moments really well. And another question, do you, like, for in this example, for example, you would use your mothering energy probably. And do you also have a fathering energy, like for example, like when you have to step up or something, like do you use like, or after, like after you needed to have like this discussion with someone, like to really step it up and speak up, and then afterwards you would father your inner child, would you do this different kind of energy, like response, or?
That's a good question. I feel like it's interesting. Like, when I do my inner child work, sometimes what she's craving is a masculine energy to nurture, and sometimes what she's craving is a feminine. When it's feminine, it's me, and when it's masculine that she's craving, I actually have like this and you can do this, like this male angel that I use who comes in and nurtures her. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but when I am out of the process and I have to deal with something, I don't know if I'm like fathering or mothering, but it's more just like my highest self, my empowerment coming through. But in the process, I do differentiate between if she needs a male or a female in that moment, or a masculine or feminine energy, and give her that. And so we can always pull from angels or someone in the past that has made us feel good, or anyone who can come and nurture a little bit.
Okay. That's interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of whatever feels good in this masculine or feminine energy is not necessarily the mother or the father, and especially not our mother and our father, because they couldn't be there in this situation. So
Yeah,
we need a
we
different.
actually don't want to use them in those memories. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Something
very,
else,
yeah.
a good way to integrate them into the healing, though, is to have your adult self, or this angel, whoever you're bringing in to nurture, have a talk with them. So tell them what they missed on, tell them what this child is needing, right? Like, you can get so creative with this, and it's really super intuitive, just tuning into what would help heal this situation. And the options are endless. Like, you can go anywhere with this if it feels healing, but you want to make sure you're not using your mom or your dad to nurture the child in the memory, because that's kind of like where, or the caretaker, I guess we could say, because that's where like the trauma happened.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a very important piece as well. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful that you have this male angel. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
I know that you were, and maybe you had a question before you want to go into this, but I know you were curious about how this ties in with self-love, right? Like,
Of
I think
course.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Do you
mean, I
want to
think
go
we've
there?
touched upon it, but like, yeah, I would love your perspective.
Yeah. So the reason that I said that I didn't do this from a place of self-love is I have a really strong belief behind that I've kind of come to through guiding so many people and myself through years of this process, which is self-love, I believe, is actually a result of living in alignment with ourselves. And the only way to live in alignment is to do shadow work for the things that are out of alignment, right? And
Mm.
so I don't make self-love ever the goal. And I didn't find self-love until I did the shadow work and started to, which cleared space for me to live in alignment with my truth. And so I believe that self-love is the result of living in alignment, and living in alignment is the result of working through our shadows and our resistance and what's stopping us from doing so. And
Okay.
so I believe that self-love came later as a result of doing this work. It wasn't what originally inspired me to do it.
Mm.
So that's my first view. And my second view is that developing a relationship with our child self creates so much self-love. It's so much easier for us as humans to have love and compassion toward a child, ourselves, or any other child than it is to have love and compassion toward our adult self for whatever reason. And so creating this ongoing relationship with your little girl or your little boy that's inside create this like playful self-love that doesn't exist without that relationship. And I find that in my life, because I have this ongoing relationship with my little girl, the decisions I make, the way I speak to myself, all of these things have shifted to a much more loving place because I know that I'm taking care of her all of the time. Anything I do is affecting her. And so that helps to shift us into this place of self-love, I believe, too.
Yeah, that sounds really beautiful. And it's so true. Like to be
Mm-hmm.
able to connect deeper and more loving to a child. That's just
Yes.
the nature of humans somehow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So so would you say your intention for your life is to live in alignment? Because you mentioned like everything you do is to be in alignment.
Yes. Yes. I think that being in alignment is the core of self-love, joy, and happiness. And being in alignment means recognizing too that you're the creator of your reality, not the victim of it. It means authenticity. I mean, a lot of things come into being in alignment. You have to do a lot of things and notice a lot of things to be in alignment. So alignment is the result before the self-love result,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, so in alignment, you mean in alignment with your higher self and your greatest potential and yeah, just the best version of you, I guess.
Yeah, I think being in alignment means knowing your no's and knowing your yeses and only saying yeses to yeses and saying no to your no's, and um, really making choices and showing up in the world in a way that is true to you, that is your truth, and isn't some, I call self-created image, isn't something that you thought you should do, isn't something that you see someone else doing that's giving them success or fame or beauty or coolness or whatever, but really, like, am I living in alignment with my truth all of the time? And that's hard to do all the time, but can we check ourselves when we aren't and get back into alignment? It's again that awareness. And so the more that we can do that, the greater our potential for self-love is, I think. Because when we're not doing that, we're essentially abandoning ourselves. And how can you love yourself when you're abandoned? You wouldn't really, how can you love yourself when you're consistently abusing or abandoning yourself, right? It doesn't it doesn't work. And so alignment, I think, is the core of self-love.
Perfect. So I think that's a beautiful place to wrap it up. Like we started with that you are desiring to bring truth and freedom to your potential clients, to the whole world, I guess. And that's also your, yes, like your highest truth, that your highest vision for yourself, to live in truth and in alignment.
Yes.
Mm.
Exactly.
So
It does tie together
beautiful.
perfectly. Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was so mind-blowing and heart-opening, and just, yeah, bringing a lot of clarity and awareness. And
Yeah.
definitely very grateful for all the tools and yeah, the guidelines that you also shared. I think, like, for all of us who are watching and who will watch this video, like, just let's use this technique and let's just really become aware of the triggers and the emotions and nurture our inner child. Like, I definitely want to implement this even more in my life, and yeah, just come back to this knowing, because I've been at a place where I had much more awareness, and then life happens, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
As
remembering
it does.
and coming back.
Yeah. Like recommitting, right? What we talk about all
Recommitting
the time.
daily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for holding this space, for asking beautiful, amazing questions, and for doing what you're doing. Like, having these conversations with so many different people provides so much information for everyone to grow and expand and get to know themselves and live their truth. And so thank you. I admire what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, inspiration is the highest form of living. And so I think, yeah, like bringing people on here will inspire so many. And I'm sure so many people are inspired by you. And so if someone would like to work with you, how could they find you best?
Yeah. So on Instagram, that's kind of the social media platform I'm most active on. It's the shadow dancer _. And it's Maya Nicole. Yeah, we can post it. And you can also send me an email. That's how a lot of people end up booking their sessions. And it's Maya, MAYA, Nicole Healing @gmail.com.
Okay, so we'll share this information in the group, probably in the comments, or even in the description. I'll find a way. So you can get in touch with Maya if you desire to just have someone to hold space, especially if you haven't done this work before. I definitely recommend, like, having someone.
And I do it for men and women. So I think that's important to point out, because a lot of this is women's work, but men and women and couples, that's a whole other realm. So all the things, but men are included here too.
Okay, yeah, so that's beautiful. If you know, like, someone, a man, or if you are a man and watching this, then you can also reach out to Maya.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you so much. So fun to start my Saturday like this. It's morning here, so.
Yeah, for me, it's nearly the end of the day, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so bye-bye to everyone who's watching.
Bye.
Sending so much love. Enjoy your self-care Saturday, and have a beautiful rest of your weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.